So leadership podcast, I always like to start off with, a little bit about your background, but also what does leadership mean to you specifically?
So just definitionally, leadership to me is around framing the work in a way that it can be done extremely well, which I think is the difference between leadership and management. So in leadership, you really do have to unpack and assimilate a lot of crazy things that are happening in your environment and turn them into something that could actually be targeted by the community that you represent. Management is around, once you understand what the mission is being effective and efficient in delivering it. So they're two very different things. There's obviously going to be an overlap in how that works, but I think leadership is the idea that you can look around corners, and to look around corners takes a fair amount of thought and a fair amount of environmental assessment to be able to get it right. That's how I think about leadership.
That's incredible, right? And I know I was talking to you a little bit offline as well, and you talked to me just really about taking the moment to understand areas of priority, areas of success that you can support and enable to the people that you actually represent. Did this type of style or this type of knowledge come to you naturally, or did you have to learn and grow along the way throughout your leadership journey?
Oh, listen, for me, I'm still learning, right? Like, so do I have it right? I don't know. All I know is that I've been in the sector a long time. I've done a lot of jobs, top to bottom, and you learn as you go. And if you're constantly putting yourself into situations where you are kind of forcing yourself to develop and learn, I think those are that's the stuff that actually helps somebody to grow and develop as an individual contributor, then a manager, and then eventually, if you're so inclined, to develop some skills along the way with leadership. I'm constantly looking for ways in which to develop. I have a coach that has turned me into a pretzel many times and kind of served it back up to me. And so to me, I don't think that I've arrived as a leader. I'm continuing to learn and I'm continuing to develop, even an older guy like me.
You and I haven't had the opportunity to work together or cross paths with each other until this conversation, but I get this tremendous amount of feedback on you, just in terms of your style, but also your willingness to solicit input, solicit feedback towards you really adopting that growth mindset as you've just described there. And it seems that, at a very early age and throughout your career, you've had some really senior roles. You've had some significant platforms that you've been a part of, and the significance of those platforms, meaning you carried a large responsibility, not just for large amounts of people, customers, partners, communities, etc. Were there specific things that you could point out to earlier on in your career that set you apart and established a platform for you to be recognized for some of those senior roles and carry that large of a responsibility?
Yeah, so somebody took a chance on me early in my career, and that guy is I'll say it. I think many of the team that'll hear this from Microsoft will know. It's Glenn Sparks. So when I was a young man working at a little company called Digital Equipment Corporation, a company of 120,000 people at the time, which no longer exists, which is the story into itself. Glenn Sparks actually hired me into that company. And in many ways, he took me under his wing and gave me some opportunities to work towards. Always be grateful for that. And I think for leaders out there listening to this podcast, you really do have to take the time to look at people coming up through the ranks and try to spot those with ambition and interest, and they're all over the place. To me, at this stage of my career, the thing that I geek out on the most is giving people opportunities, working with them, and just seeing them thrive. And to me, there's no better accomplishment as a leader than to find people out there in the raw and to give them opportunity and to give them a little bit of help and see what happens. And oftentimes, people really do well. It doesn't always work out, but as a leader, if you're not out there trying, and as a leader, if you have yourself in the center of things, that's a trouble spot. Like you really have to think about the broader mission, and you really have to put the mission first. If you see yourself in it, it's not a great signal, right? We just saw in the United States a leader leave that spent his term leading the United States in the center of his own mission. It doesn't land well. But when I think about the opportunities that I've been given, it's because somebody took a chance on me. And that's really powerful both ways. Glenn is a good friend of mine today. At the time, he pushed me, and I'm grateful for that because I developed and learned as a result.
I got to tell you, I admire the humility, firstly. I also appreciate the insight and the context there, just in terms of the greater mission and the greater picture and vision of success for the team, the customer, the partners that are being represented as that specific leader or for that specific leader. What did Glenn see in you that made him take a chance on you?
I don't know. Like, honestly, I think maybe I worked hard. To me, I don't think I was ever the brightest light bulb out there, but I was willing to work hard. And I think he did see that part. And then it just sort of worked out from there. I again, super grateful to Glenn for taking a chance on me because it really opened up a lot of potential. I realized that there was more, and I became hungry for more because somebody pushed me, and that person was Glenn.
Throughout your journey, you've also had the opportunity to be on the other side of that, where you've had to identify individuals and push them and give them the chance. And still today, like, so what goes through your mind, I guess, or your criteria process when you select someone to give them a chance? Like, what do you typically look for?
Most of it is I need to know that that person really cares and is committed. Commitment is so important. You'll find as you develop as a leader that you can't get it done on your own. In fact, you really do have to rely on people. So to me, the single biggest characteristic I look for, aside from just basic competence in a functional area, is commitment to getting it done. If you have people around you that you know you can rely on to grab things, and even if they don't fully get it, you know they're going to come and kick your door in and ask for help when they need it, and they're going to go off and execute in an independent fashion when they can. That's really important. I would take commitment over a resume that shows a lot of stuff in there that is somewhat unproven. I really do look for that. To me, that's critical.
It's that sheer passion and drive, and I guess ability to want to be pushed as well, right? That really puts you in a position to identify a good candidate that you can push and support and take a chance on, because it makes that path to success, I guess, a little bit more seamless than any other different one. Talking about passion and commitment and just drive to getting things done, like, I love the role that you're in right now, and I want to jump into that a little bit because, I read a press release where you mentioned your transition from your previous job to the one that you took in now is very different, right? And you talked a little bit about why you made this appointment or why you decided to take on this journey. And I think one of the things you mentioned there was, as you got a little older, you started to think that, what could you really do to contribute to the place that you were actually brought up in? And I thought that was really cool that you mentioned that. And you also talked about taking that moment being a really good time for you to dig in and determine what you can do to develop the community. Like, talk me through that. What goes through that process and why make that decision?
That's an interesting one. I was approaching 55. That was a while ago, and I'm still working on it. And I thought, I'd been on a plane for my whole career pretty much. I think at Microsoft, I traveled maybe 120 flights a year for 10 years. It was crazy. And I realized I spent less time in Ottawa than I did anywhere else. If I looked at the amount of business time I was spending, I think it was in Toronto more than I was in Ottawa. But it just occurred to me that I could take the things that I'd learned and I could apply them in my own backyard. And for those that don't know, Ottawa just happens to be a very strong R&D center. It's a small city. It's 1 million people. But because you've got big government with lots of R&D labs, there's a lot of tech companies. There's like 1,800 tech companies, and it's not a recent phenomenon. So there's a lot of potential there. And I would say at the same time when I was looking, the fourth industrial revolution was being a little bit maybe sensationalized. It became almost sloganish, but there's a reality inside the fourth industrial revolution that really inspired me to look at it. And that is that it's very different than the previous 20 years, where anyone with a big idea could, in fact, create a business and to get things off the ground. Because everything has gone digital, you can be super specialized as well. So the era is also known as the rise of the startups. And so as I looked at that, I was inspired to consider how I could help my local community, because it wasn't obvious to me that even with a generation of capability, being an R&D center, that would protect the city from what really lies ahead. And I think this is true for most regional economies around the world. The difference with the fourth industrial revolution over previous generations is that you can actually lose a mandate in a city and it can go somewhere else. And it isn't obvious that it would be replaceable, because the world is super global now. Like, it was really global 20 years ago. Now you can get whatever you want, whenever you want it, even in the center of a pandemic, and you probably don't even know the place of origin. So what inspired me to go after it was recognizing that the economy of Ottawa, it's pretty strong, because you've got 1 in 5 workers work for the government, 1 in 9 work for a tech company. So it's a resilient structure, but there's no guarantee going forward. And I was inspired to look at that, to make a contribution, to make sure that strategically the areas of focus would set the city up for success for years to come. That's actually what drove me to do it in the end. I actually read the book from Klaus Schwab out of the World Economic Forum, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. There's a follow-up book called Shaping the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which really gets at the societal impacts, that there will be winners and losers. I hate to frame it that way, but that's reality. And that as a world, we can actually help to make buoyant markets that could be left behind at a time when populations are just, over the top, right? There's a lot of risk in global markets with this. So to me, the focus we've had, if you look at things like Area X.0, if you look at the life sciences work we do, if you look at the work that we do with GovTech, these are long-term bets that we made almost 4 years ago. And they're working. They really are working, and they're showing impact. They're showing a little swagger, and we are getting a lot done. So I would say I'm pretty proud of the work that my team has done in that, and it's been an incredibly rewarding journey working for an economic development agency. I don't feel like I'm pinned down by how an agency of that nature has done it in the past. We're doing it very differently now. And I congratulate my team on that, because they're just incredible. So I feel really lucky to be among them.
That's amazing context. Really large responsibility and undertaking that you really embarked on with this journey, right? But it just speaks to who you are as a leader, and it just speaks to your passion and your drive that you've displayed. Without sharing any specific content, of course, can you talk to me a little bit about failure? How do you typically deal with failure, right? Carrying that large responsibility, making those big bets that you talked about, or those long-term bets that you talked about there, right? That you've been pretty pleased with the outcomes on. I'm curious to know if there were any that you made a bet on that didn't work out, or do you consider that a failure, and how do you deal with that as a leader?
Yeah, actually, for sure. I mean, throughout my whole career, there's always things you try out, they don't go the way you wanted. Yeah. I think the most important thing would be learning from it and applying it. I would say even Area X.0, when we got into it, we made some spot decisions along the way. It didn't go exactly the way we wanted. In fact, an example is we called it Ottawa L5. L5 refers to level 5 autonomy for autonomous vehicles, which means it's essentially you can be in a vehicle, it doesn't have a steering wheel anymore. So it's level 5 autonomy. It's fully autonomous. The driver basically is reading a book or hooked up to Wi-Fi doing work, and they're on their way somewhere. And so the problem with L5 is it's going to be a discontinued standard. And so we actually had to change the name of Area X.0 to Area X.0 because we selected a brand that was wrong. And so, learning for me, it was our friends at Accenture that helped us to discover the error, and away we go, right? So we had to make that change. These things happen, and the most important thing is that you don't convince yourself that this will pass. Had we left it as L5, we would be in trouble, because we actually have a pretty popular brand now with AreaX.O. It's got global coverage. We really are getting a lot of take up with global companies wanting to do a multi-vendor, multi-platform test in their mobility play in whatever form that is. And so thankfully we selected a name that's a little cooler. It's a takeoff on Area 51 and X-Files slammed together. So thanks to the Accenture team also for helping us to select that brand name.
No, that's good. I love how you highlighted the partnership there and the element of actual collaboration as it pertains to dealing with failure, but also not being surprised by failure, and also being able to course correct quickly, right? Like there's a lot of those components that go into managing failure specifically. Of course, my audience is a lot of individual contributors that are honing in on their craft and trying to develop and transition into a leadership role, right? In addition to everything that you've talked about, just in terms of taking a chance, being able to have the passion, have the drive, being able to use the support of the team, being able to have a growth mindset and continuously learn, and then also how you've described the element of dealing with failure. What are some of the key principles and advices that you have for people that are up and coming leaders?
Yeah, let me close off on the failure piece. I remember Satya Nadella. He actually had a slogan around this. I don't know whether he's still using it, but failure is the path to mastery, provided you learn from it. Right? I really think that's an important way to think about it. I guess the only other thing that I would suggest is, and part of it comes out of values and culture. Culture is how we work. It isn't necessarily good. Values is how we aspire to work. And I think it really matters. Like when you unpack Microsoft's values, take a close look at the words, because it's very likely that those reflect the leadership from the very top of the company. I'm quite sure that Satya thinks about values a lot in terms of the company he wants Microsoft to be. My executive coach, John Burdett, who lives in Toronto, he's an amazing guy. He's an acclaimed author. One of his recent books was The A to Z of Culture, and it's just amazing. He helped me with developing the values for Invest Ottawa. And one of the things that he really helped me to understand is words are just words. Values have to reflect the leaders' genuine views of things. If not, you're going to be in trouble because you won't be able to live them. And so to me, those are words that I really do think about a lot as a leader. If you're selecting words around values and constantly reinforcing them with your team, if they're not genuine, you are really going to find yourself in a real predicament, because you're going to be driving people towards a certain way of behaving and activating their work that isn't compatible with you as a leader. And I really feel that's an important takeaway. It's got to be genuine, it's got to be authentic, and it's really got to reflect you as a leader. So when you look at Microsoft's values, if you as an individual contributor or a manager or a leader inside the company don't feel them, you really need to think about what you're doing and where you are, because I'm quite sure that they would be the reflection of Microsoft's senior leadership team. And very important, right? If you don't have alignment on culture, values in particular, because that's where the puck is going. Really important leadership principle. I can't imagine anything actually more important.
That's incredible. Like, I'm so glad you shared that, and I love that you talked about specifically the difference in the delineation between culture and values, and how value really reflects the actual character of the leadership team that you work for, right? I think this is a phenomenal place to leave it, Michael. I can't tell you how grateful I am for you taking the time to have this conversation. Certainly valuable for people listening, but also very valuable for me as well. So thank you so much. I'm really glad I got to meet you and talk to you about leadership.
Thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Absolutely.